when you left the military, you retired. What rank did you retire?
Lieutenant commander.
Lieutenant commander. So you retire. What's transition like for you? Did you plan to be Jocko? Did you plan to be like extreme ownership and all these things? Was that your goal to transition like this, or did it?
No.
Did it happen?
It just happened. About 6 months before I retired, I had a friend of mine that owned a big company, and he asked me to talk to his executive team about leadership. I knew him through jiu-jitsu, so he's like a jiu-jitsu bro. So I said, yeah, no problem. And I went up and talked to his team, his executive team, about leadership. And when I got done, he said, I want you to talk to every division I have in my company. And I was like, well, I'm retiring. I'm just going to run my gym and train jiu-jitsu and surf and hang out with my kids. And he's like, I'll pay you. And I said, okay. So I started going around the country, talking to these various divisions. And then at one of those divisional meetings, the CEO of his parent company was there. And he watched me. And when I got done, he said, I want you to come and talk to all my CEOs. I went and talked to all the CEOs at a CEO summit. And then a bunch of those CEOs came and said, I want you to talk to my company. I want you to talk to my company. I want you to talk to my company. And so next thing you know, I had a business. And I reached out to Leif and I was like, hey, bro, I need some fire support over here. And he's like, let's go. And so we started, working with different companies. Eventually the demand signal for this information written down somewhere came up. We wrote down the information. Eventually that turned into, got seen by a literary agent who, recognized that this could be a book. We ended up writing the book proposal, and the book proposal got rejected a few times, which I didn't really think much of it. But then, one of the publishers, Mark Resnick, he's our editor and from St. Martin's Press, he took a shot on it. And it ended up being a pretty good gamble for him because the book did well. And that's,
I was gonna say, there's some publishers kicking themselves right now.
Yeah. But then as we were doing promotions for this book, or as we were strategizing about how to do promotions for this book, and again, I didn't have any social media. Never done any interviews. But Leif was married to Jenna Lee, who was at Fox at the time. And so Leif had an avenue to really help us out. So I felt like I needed to do something to, carry a little bit of the load myself. I ended up doing a podcast. A friend of mine, SEAL Doc Parsley, was friends with Dr. Peter Attia, who is friends with Tim Ferriss. And Parsley told Peter Attia, like, Tim Ferriss should have this guy Jocko on his podcast. Ended up doing his podcast and, becoming friends with Tim. And then Joe Rogan heard that podcast. And this was in 2015. So podcasting wasn't really the thing that it is now. And I would say podcasting peaked a few years later, or didn't peak, but it really got traction a few years later. So in 2015, I was on, those are the two biggest podcasts in the world. I was on both of them in a span of a month or so. And both of them told me, you should start your own podcast. And so I had the two biggest podcasters in the world telling me to start a podcast. I was like, okay, I'll start a podcast. And so I talked to my friend Echo Charles, who knew how to work a computer and press record. Here we are. And that's how the podcast got started. But it wasn't a grand plan or anything like that.
Yeah.
I didn't foresee any of this stuff happening. That's one of the things I always laugh about is I never took any pictures of anything. Like, there's very few pictures that I have from my time in the SEAL teams, from my time in Iraq.
I did the same. I hate that now.
Like, so I bummed out now. But, when you see the same 9 pictures of me in Iraq, it's like, well, I wasn't there with a Kodak camera taking a bunch of pictures. But it's because none of this was, I thought I was going to retire and train jiu-jitsu and surf and play guitar and hang out with my wife and kids. And I ended up not doing that.
There's a book called, I don't know if you read it, The Myth of the Overnight Success.
No, but the title kind of says it all, I guess.
Right. Yeah. People see, you where you are and they're like, man, how lucky is Jocko? Like overnight success, right? But they don't see the work, the grinding that came.
Yeah, and I am lucky. I was very lucky that guy originally asked me to go talk to his team about leadership. I was very lucky that Doc Parsley, when he told Peter Attia, who told Tim Ferriss to have me on that's very lucky stuff. Lucky enough that Joe Rogan heard it. Lucky enough that Joe Rogan at the time, we were all on Twitter like a lot back then. And that's because when our book came out, it was actually Leif Babin's wife who was like, you need to go on social media. And I literally said, no, I'm not going on it because it was just didn't seem like a thing. And she was like, "You're an idiot." And I said, "Well, Roger." And eventually Tim Ferriss said, you know, it wasn't recorded, but he goes, "Dude, you need to go on this thing called Twitter." And I said, and now I have, you know, this guy tell me to do a podcast, tell me to go on Twitter. So I went on Twitter, and I remember the first time I posted anything, I had to call this girl, Jamie, that works with us at Echelon Front. I was like, "How do I post something?" You know, she's like, "You're an idiot." I said, "I know." But at that time, you know, Twitter was smaller and everyone was smaller. And so Joe Rogan hit me up like, "Hey dude, heard your podcast. Do you want to come on mine?" I'm like, "Yeah." You know what I mean? Like real simple things. So, I mean, I worked hard my whole life, but there's definitely a lot of luck and blessing that comes into it. Like I said, I've had a very lucky and blessed life and career thus far. And, you know, I'm a hard worker.
Yeah. That's to say luck creates opportunity, but then the grind that you put after that is where you cash in. And
yeah. I'm a hard worker. I'll say that. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the strongest guy. I'm not the fastest guy, but I can definitely work hard, and I don't need a lot of sleep, which is always beneficial. You know, it's very beneficial. Like I said, got very limited genetic gifts, but I was very lucky in my job that even though I wasn't the strongest and I wasn't the fastest, I didn't need to sleep. So, okay, I can work and I can get things done. And that ends up being beneficial.
And by the way, shout out to Leif's parents. I love his parents. I've met them a couple of times at Congress, and Mr. Babin, Dr. Babin, Congressman. He's read all my books. He's super encouraging to me. Just amazing. They're amazing people.
Yeah. He's a great guy and a great family for sure.
Yeah. Hey guys, 10 years ago, I had found myself in a position to where investing in Mighty Oaks and all the different things I'm involved in, I had found myself not prepared for retirement. And I went to my friend Ryan Wheelis at Allied Wealth. I'm so happy with the results for me that I asked him to partner with this show, and he is a partner of this show now. So if you're like me and you need someone to help you with your retirement, with your investments, with just your overall wealth management, go to alliedwealth.com and meet Ryan and his team to get you set up.